What's up everyone, Sunny here, and today we're going to be doing a freeCodeCamp survey form. Now, this is the example we're giving on freeCodeCamp, but we're going to make it unique in our own way and make it look like this. And as you can see, I'm going to go ahead and test the code that I already have. And test it. When I run the test, 100%. So stay tuned, get ready to code. Alright, so I'm using Visual Studio Code as my editor. So I've already have my HTML files open. All I have to do is put in my default tags. And I'm going to change the title to survey form. I'm going to also link, I totally forgot. I'm going to create my CSS file. And I'm going to link my HTML to my CSS. And I'm also going to link I'm going to create an icon for my web page. So how this works is that all you have to do is really just inside rel you put in icon, and href is the location of the file or the URL if you're getting the file from online, the image from online. So I'm going to show you how what I mean when I say icon. The icon is this little thing right here. This is how you add it to your web page. You see it right here. So now I'm gonna just go ahead and follow the guidelines. Okay, so first we're gonna add a header. We're gonna create an h1 tag with an ID of title. With an ID of title. We're gonna create a p tag for number 2 with an ID of description. For those of you who wondering how I just did that, it's just a shortcut in Visual Studio Code. You know, if you're using any other editor, then you have to type in the full thing. So number 3, a form with an ID of survey form. Inside that form, I'm gonna have an input field with an ID of name. And it's of type text because name is text. So number 5, all we have to do is copy this. Number 5 is email, and the ID is also email. And number 6, if I enter this, I will see an HTML validation error. So what this, you don't really have to do this, because once you set your type attribute of your input to email, then automatically, if you don't input an email, you'll get an error. It's just a built-in thing in HTML5. So number 7, I can enter a number field. So what I'm going to do is copy this and just paste it and set my type to number and my ID also to number. So number 8 is the same thing we talked about with the email. Automatically, if your attribute is number, it will, if you don't put in a number, you won't even be able to input anything else really. It only accepts numbers. So yeah, automatically it's just in there for you, so you don't have to check for that. So we're in number 9. If I enter anything outside the range of the number, okay, so this is just self-explanatory attributes. So it just allows, these two attributes allow you to set a fixed range that you want inputted inside this number field, number input. So if I wanted numbers from 0 to 100, all I'd put is minimum 0 and max. Oh, okay. Max 100. So we won't be able to see any changes for now, because now look, you could just input anything. But you see though, it has a validation error, validation message. Number value must be less than or equal to 100. But the only way the message could really pop up if you had a submit button, and when you click the submit button, you get the validation error. So for now, we won't see anything happen so far. But I'm soon going to change these values anyways. For the name, email, and number. Okay. So now we just need to put labels for each of these, because if you look at this, this is just nothing. This is just boxes, really. We don't know which is which. So we're gonna just put in the label tag, and inside the label tag, we're gonna give it an ID of name label. And I'm also gonna, so this for attribute in this label is to link or point to whichever input this label is for. So since this label is for this input, we put in the ID of this input, which is name, inside this label. So now it points to it. Alright, so now inside the label tag, now we could just put name, and boom, So don't worry about all this being in line. You can change that real soon. We're gonna do the same thing for email. Okay, so all we have to do is change the name, the ID to email, and the for, since this label is for this email, we're gonna add in the for inside the email, the ID of this input inside this for attribute, and we're gonna change the name to email. What? We're gonna do the same thing for the number. Change the ID to number, and the label, the ID of this to number. And for now, we can just call this number. All right. So now, where are we? We're number 11. For the name, email, I can see a placeholder. So what a placeholder is that default text that is in most inputs, not all. Some people choose not to add them in, but they kind of look nice. If you look at this, it's just plain empty. It just looks stale. So this is the placeholder. This is just the default text, and if you put in anything, it disappears, right? So that's what we're gonna add in our one. So I'm just gonna call this placeholder okay. Inside the input, we're gonna put a placeholder called enter your name. Okay, our placeholder is gonna be enter your name. And for our email, enter your email. And for this, enter your number. Okay, so we're in number 12. Alright, so number 12 says that inside the form I can see an option from a drop down that has a corresponding ID, a drop down. So they want a drop down menu. Okay, so if you don't know what a drop down menu is for whatever reason, it's this thing right here. When you click it, it gives you a drop down of values. So to do this, what you do is you type in the tag select, and we're supposed to give it an ID of drop down. And so this is your select. All of this all together is your select, but the options, every single one of these itself is an option, right? So so inside this select, we can add in a tag called option actually. So we're just gonna repeat it for now and leave it blank. As you can see, we have 4 options. We can leave it blank for now. We're just gonna tick all of these off our list. Okay, so number 13, inside the form element, I can select a field from one or more groups of radio button. Each group should be grouped using name attribute. Oh, I totally forgot. Alright, no worries. So I forgot I already have these things written down for me. So all I have to do is just basically this is what they want you to do. Okay. So it says that number 13, it wants you to put in radio buttons. So how you're gonna do this is just you create a label, right? A label tag, and inside the label you put in your input tag. And to create a radio button, you put in type radio inside your input, give it a name, and give it a value. Now your value is supposed to be the thing that shows up. So let me show you an example. So right now we're looking at amazing, right? So this is amazing right here. See what I did there? Right? So this basically is my label. If I remove it, you see it disappears. So this label, the value is supposed to be the same as the label. So it has to be the same. Okay, so I gave it the input an ID of 1 because I want to just for this. So I want to point to this input even though it's inside it. It's just good practice. I want to point to this input which has an ID of 1, just like we did above with our ID and the 4. And all I do is repeat the same thing, right? And all of it is inside a separate div tag with an ID of radio buttons. Alright, so now we're gonna check. We got this. We're gonna do number 14. Number 14 is inside the form I can select several fields from a series of checkboxes, each of which must have a value. So we're gonna do the same thing. It's the exact same thing. And oh, I totally forgot. So before you continue, so you realize that the name of each one of these inputs in the radio button is experienced. All of them have the same name, right? And that is to group all of them together. So let me show you an example. So with it, right, I can only select one radio button because all of them are grouped together, and that's why it's a radio button. You can't select 2 radio buttons. If I wanted to select 2, I create checkboxes, right? So what this does is that, for example, if I change the name of this, right, I change the name of good. So now good has its own separate name, but all 3 of these have the same name. So now I could select amazing and good, but when I try to select the 3 others, right, is because they have the same name, that you can't select all of them at the same time, right? But good has its own name. So I if I change this name, the name of good, to exp, and I change this to exp, so this is the third one. These two have the same name. These two right here, this and that, has the same name. So I could only select one of them at a time. But these two at the end have the same name also, so I could select either one of them at the same time. So now the idea is if all of them have the same name, I can only select one, right? Because if all of them have no name or different names, I have to I'll be able to select every single one of them. So look at this. Check this out. Right? Every single one of them have their own names. So now I could select every one of them at the same time. But if we go back and change everything back to normal, now I can only select one. So if they have the same name, you could only select one out of them. But if they have different names, you could select two different ones or three or more, because right. So if you want to select multiple values, you shouldn't use radio buttons, because radio buttons is normally used just for one option, right? Male or female. If you need more options for them to select to, all you have to do is use checkboxes. You go down to our checkboxes. It's in its own div. It has a title. I use a p tag. You could go ahead and use the h1 if you want, h2, h3, I don't know, if you want to. And so now I do the same thing as I did with the radio button, right? I create a label with a for that is linked to the ID of the input. And to get checkboxes, all I have to do is in the type attribute, I just put in checkbox and I give it name, the same name of fixes, just like our radio button. We give it the same exact name, right? And give it the value of the label, same exact value of the label. All right, and that's basically all you have to do for this. There's no real catch. And before anything, you have to make sure each and every one of them have their unique ID, because you don't want it be interfering with these IDs. You realize that this is 1 to 9. None of them have the same exact ID. You don't want it to point to the wrong things. Okay. We're number 15. So in number 15, no, right here. So it wants us to add a text area. Now what your text area is this text box right here. This big text box. See that? This comment box looking thing. This is your text area. And the tag you use for that is the text area tag. and I'm presented. Okay, now lastly, number 16, it wants you to add a submit button. Inside the form, I'm presented with a button with ID submit to submit all my inputs. Button type equals submit, and it has an ID of submit. Now, this is not the only way you can create buttons. If you want to create buttons, you can also use this method. So let me show you the example. Submit. You can also do this: input, type, and submit. Just like that, and it's the same thing. So now we're about done with this. All we have to do now is style the whole thing. Okay, so before all that, I'm gonna make sure it looks exactly like this, has the same information, email. Okay, so now you could style it however you want. I'm just gonna make it exactly like this. I'm gonna change here where I set this to number. I'm gonna change it to ID number. The maximum number for this is 10,000. I'll just keep it at 1,000. So ID number, email. All right. So the information for this, I've already written it down. All I'm gonna do is copy it from right here. Okay. So it's exactly the same thing. All I did was put in the values, and normally if you were making a website, you have to put these values inside this value attribute, but it's not really needed since this is just a static page, right? So now all we gotta do, okay, so now all I'm gonna do is style this whole thing, because I think I'm set. I have everything. Yep. Okay, so oh, I forget to put in my header. Okay, my H1 is called this. So what I'm doing now is I'm gonna just style this, because if you look at this, the styling for these two are two different things, and this is the logo of Caribase Store. It's not a real thing, it's just made up, right? So it's different. So I'm gonna put it inside a div tag, right? And to make the S, the C, and the S have same styling, I'm just gonna put them inside a span tag. Okay, and I'm gonna give this an ID of logo. Alright, so now I'm gonna put in my little description from underneath. Okay, I'm also gonna put in the text that is over my drop down inside a paragraph. Okay, I think I have everything I need. Alright, so now we're gonna style everything. Okay, so first what we're gonna do, well, what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna separate these two. It's a really neat feature in Visual Studio, so I could see both at the same time, both files. First thing I'm gonna do is add a Universal Selector, which is this asterisk right here, and inside it you'll notice that there's this default margin in the web page. So what I want to do, I want to remove it. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to set my margin to 0, and that will remove the margin for every single thing on the whole page. So you see that? So when I remove it, this happens, and when I put 0, that happens. I'm also going to remove the padding, even if you might not see it, but it's still there. So I'm going to remove any default padding and set it to 0. I'm going to change the box sizing to border box. So now I'm going to add a background image. So what I'm gonna do is, in the body, I'm gonna add a background image to the body. And if you look at my example, or even this example from freeCodeCamp itself, there's this background, but there's this purple blur on top of it. I'm going to show you how that works. Okay, so first I'm going to add a background image. And I'm just going to go ahead and get the location of this image, the URL of this image. I think this is it right here. Boom. Okay, and I think I should change the color of the whole document to white. Yeah, but before that, to create the blur effect on this background image, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna all this content is inside a separate div inside the body. So if you look right here, you will see that I have this div right here, this container that holds everything. So this is where it begins, and this is where it ends. It holds everything. So I'm gonna add a transparent layer in this div so it could appear to be a blur. Let me show you how that look like. So this container is called main, right? Now I'm gonna call main, but I'm gonna give it a background color of black. So you realize that now, because the content is inside main, the background changes, right? But what I want is, I want that all of this is in the whole page. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna set the height to 100 view height. Boom. And I'm gonna set the width to 100 VW, view width. What that does is, everything that you can see on the screen right here is gonna stretch to the 100% of the whole page, right? Same thing, the width, it's stretched to 100%. So now I'm just gonna add a background color. Now I'm gonna set an opacity. What opacity is, it is that it makes it transparent. Actually, no. What I realized just happened. Okay, wrong thing. We're not gonna change the opacity, because when we change the opacity, it also affects the content. So what I'm gonna do instead is, if you're using Visual Studio Code, you could just hover over this image and change the transparency of the background. You see that? I'm gonna just make it a little darker, a little lighter. Here is 100% transparent, here it's darker, and just like that. So how you could accomplish this is by typing this RGBA code, or if you're using Visual Studio Code, you could just mess with this and see how dark you want it. I'm just gonna leave it right here. Now if I wanted to make it like a purple, just like this, make it this purple blur, all I'd have to do is just change the color right here to purple, and I'll move this here. You see that? But that's not what I want right now. This is good enough for me. All right. So now you can just go ahead and style our H1 tag. H1. So what I'm gonna do is, I'm gonna set my font, the font of everything. I'm gonna change it first to Arial. Font family, Arial. And now I'm gonna make my H1 50 pixel, no, font size 50 pixels. I think that's a little too much. 40, 45, probably better. All right. Now I'm gonna style this right here so it look like this. So I'm gonna go inside logo right here, logo, and I'm gonna style the first letter of each word. So C and S is in, both of them are inside a span tag. So I'm gonna target logo and span, and I'm gonna change the font family to dancing script, I think it's dancing script. But before all of that, I have to link my font in the HTML page first. So this is my link right here. These two are my links. So I'm gonna just take them and put them in. So now that we have that, you see our font changed, right? But I want the font size to be a little bit bigger, so I'll give it a font size bigger than the original font, so 55 pixels. Alright, I'm gonna give it a no, okay. And the color, I'm gonna change the color to orange. But before all that, I also have to style the logo, because the letters that come after need their own styling. So I'm gonna just target logo because they're inside of logo, and change the font family to this. This is the name of the font. I already linked it, because if you notice, I have two links. These two are my fonts. Boom. I think the font size needs to be a little bit bigger, like 50. Also, I'm gonna give my letters a little spacing, because things are too tight, too much still. Maybe 3. Yeah, I think that's all right. Now I'm just gonna go down and set this to display inline, because originally everything was at display block. So if I change this to display block, it's gonna do the same thing from before. But when you set it to display inline, it becomes in the same line with this, because both are inside header h1, the h1 tag, right? So if I set this to inline, it's gonna be in the same line with the survey form. All right, so now I gotta style the p tag. It has an ID of description. The reason I use the ID instead of the p tag is because I have other p tags in the document, so I'd rather be more specific. So give it a font size of 25. That's a little too much. Font style, make it italic. And before all of that, I'll make the whole font, put the whole font in the center. Now we're gonna set it to center, and if you notice, it's at the center of the page. But instead of doing that, here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna set h1 comma description I'm gonna do this instead, because I want both of these. I want these two to be centered instead of just having one centered. I want both of these to be centered, and instead of typing one for each, I center both using this. So now what I'm gonna do is on the description, I'm gonna give it a margin bottom to space it out a little bit of 20. All right, now let's go style our form. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna put our form inside its own container. So we're gonna give it a border to actually see the container. For now, 2 pixels solid white. So this is our container, and what I'm gonna do is I want the container to be 50, well, let's try 50%, the width of the container to be around 50% of the whole page. So looks width 50%. I think that's too small. Let me see. Oh no, I think that's perfect. All right, so it's 50% of the whole page, right? But what I want to happen is that I want this box to be centered. So how you pull this off is that you set the margin, first you set it to display block, and then you set your margin. So margin top and bottom you set it to 0, and left and right you set it to auto, and it will automatically center it. Both sides are equal automatically for you. You don't have to eyeball anything. So now let's check our example. We don't have a border. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna set the background color of the form to black, right? And instead of making the background of the whole document, instead of setting it to this dark transparent, I'm gonna make it a little lighter. Nope, some around here. And what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna go down to the form, and I'm gonna set the transparency and make it a little darker, but it's still gonna be transparent. So something like this, it's a little bit transparent. Yeah, it's a little bit, it's darker than the whole body, but it's still transparent a little bit. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go down, and I'm going to target okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to make everything in the form to display block to be one after the other in a stack form, because right now most of the things are in line. If you look at this, all of this is in line and all of that is in line. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna set this to display block. Actually no. What I am gonna do, I'm gonna set all the input inside the form, and I'm gonna set all of them to display block. Boom. Right? But And as you can see, everything is in this stack form. It's one after the other, but I don't want these to change. Remember, these are also inputs. Each one of these are their own inputs. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna target these, which are, if you look right here, you realize these are my radio buttons, right? So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna set these radio buttons to inline, just like I did with the header, and I'm gonna make it in the same line with the text. So check this out. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna target input inside this radio button. So I'm gonna go radio button because it's inside the container of radio buttons, input. And also I'm going to do the same thing for checkboxes, which is inside here. So I'm going to say checkbox input, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to display inline. Right? But if you notice, this still is not how we want it, but don't forget that each one of these inputs are inside their own labels. So now I'm gonna target the label, right? So now the label, so these two, this and the input are inside their own label. So now when I'm gonna set the label itself to block, now all of these are gonna be one after the other, right, in a stack form. Let me show you. So now I'm gonna target the label. So I'm gonna say radio buttons label. I'm gonna do the same thing, checkboxes label, and I'm gonna set the display to block, so it could be in a stack format. Boom, just like that. And basically we're all set, right? So now I'm just going to style form, the form tag, and style every font size 25. For now we're gonna go with that, and before that I'm going to go to these inputs and I'm gonna make them, okay, I'm gonna give them 100% width. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to target each one of these individually, because don't forget, all of these, the checkboxes and the radio buttons, are also input. So if I type in input, it's just gonna gonna affect these as well. So I have to individually type the names, type the ID of each of these. So it's gonna look something like this. So the ID of my first input is name, the second one is email, and the third one is number. So all I'm gonna do is go in name, comma, email, comma, number, right? And I'm gonna set the width to 100%. It's 100% of the whole page. of the whole form, I mean the form, right? But I also want to style the drop down menu. So I'm gonna go, the ID of my drop down is drop down. I'm gonna set it to drop down, and it's also 100%. So now what I notice is that the form is still too wide, so I'm gonna decrease the width to about 40%, the width of my form to 40%. Still a little too big. Change it to 30. Okay, maybe 36, I don't know. Yeah, just leave it there. So now we're gonna add a little padding to our form. Boom. I'll remove this border. Okay, so now I'm going to increase the size of my, now at first I'm going to decrease the font size of my of the font in the form, because that's too big. So now I'm going to set my border, the border radius, to 5. That will give me a rounded border around my input tag and my drop down. And also I'm gonna change the height to like 20 pixels. Still too small. 50 pixels. Too large. 30. 40. Yeah. Okay, and now I'm gonna set the font size for all of them to 20 pixels, and the color to white, to black actually. Okay, and now inside my input tags, I'm going to go ahead and add a little padding to it. Alright. Okay. So now I'm going to space everything out a little bit. So how I'm gonna do this is all the inputs, I'm gonna give them a margin top and bottom. So these are all my inputs, so I'm gonna give them a margin left and right 0, wait no, top and bottom of 10 pixels. Ten pixels top and bottom, 0 pixels left and right. So it will look like this. Actually, what I should do is I should do the same for all the inputs. So now I'm gonna go down. I'm gonna just type in form input and do this instead. what I did was I spaced out everything a little bit, so I give it a margin for every single thing. Notice that all these inputs and all of this have a little space at the top and at the bottom of it. So now what I'm gonna do is these paragraph tags, I'm gonna give it a little more spacing to the top, so, and to the bottom. Just like this. Alright, so honestly, we're basically almost done. What I realize is this is a little bit bigger, but hey, it doesn't matter. Yeah, it doesn't really matter. I mean, I'm pretty sure you guys get the idea. The size really don't matter. What font I use. I'm just showing you how I got this to work, how all this is done. That's all I'm trying to show you. So even if you realize that, hey, this has more spacing, this has more width, this is taller, it doesn't matter. As long as you know how to do it, you could go ahead and do it yourself. Alright, so now we can go ahead and style this text area right here. We're gonna set it, we're gonna add a p tag to it as well. On top of it, I forgot to add that. Like that. And now I'm gonna target the text area, and I'm gonna set the width to 100%. The width is 100% of the form, and I'll give it a height of 300. That's too much. 200. Yeah. I'm gonna also set the color to black. I'm gonna add a placeholder. I'm gonna change the font size to 25 pixels. Too much. 22. Still too much. 20. Alright, now I'm gonna give it a little bit of padding of like 10 pixels. And voila. Last thing is our button. Go down and we say form, target our button. Color, background color is orange. So we can set up the background color of our button to orange. The color is already white, and we're gonna set the width to 100%. And instead of giving it a height, we'll use the padding. Give it a padding top and bottom of 20 pixels, left and right of 0 pixels. That's too much. 10. That's too little. Well, no. Now we can just give it a font size 25, and boom, there you go. But I'm gonna set the margin top to 20 pixels to give it a little spacing. We're almost done. Last thing is that we're gonna go ahead and when you hover over it, I want it to change color. So background color still orange, but what I'm gonna do is, if you notice, when I said the back, when I hover over it, you see it's a little bit transparent. I don't know if you could see it, like this bike wheel right here, you could kind of see it right here. It's a little bit transparent. And if you notice that when I hover over it now, right, when I hover over the image, what happened is you don't see this pointer just like this. See, the cursor changes. To fix that, all we do is set the cursor to pointer, and when I hover over it, this happens. Now, to change the background color, all I have to do is change this right here. Remember, this is only in Visual Studio. I don't know if it's in anything else. Change it like this, and boom. As you may notice, the background image is repeating itself, unlike this background, right? So what we're gonna do to fix that is we're gonna go up to the body, and we're gonna set the background repeat to no repeat. And when you set that, you see it doesn't repeat, but I want the image to cover the whole background. So this is how it looks when I set it to background repeat. Sloppy. So I want the image to cover the whole background. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna set the background size to cover, but still there's this piece that's missing. So now to fix that, we're gonna go ahead right here in main, the container that contains everything, and we can set the height to auto, and boom, fixed. And the wheel is exactly right here, and boom, here's your background. So now what's left for us to do is we can go ahead and change this issue. When I make the image, when I make the windows smaller and bigger, it messes with it. The width of the form. So to fix that, what I should have done from the beginning was set the form to a fixed width, right? I want to set the form to a fixed width because right now the width of the form is like 40% of the view width. It's 46% of what you can see right now. From here to here, it's 46%. So what I'm gonna do instead is take, for example, this is how small the Google browser window could go, and this is exactly 500 pixels right here. You can't go more than this, you can't go lower than this. And this, when it's like this, is 500 pixels, right? So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna change this to 500 pixels, and there you are. And when I change it, it remains consistent. And when it gets smaller, boom. You don't even have to use a media query to do anything in this. And that's it. So now, all we have to do, I think there was something we had to do in our guideline, which is well, all we have to do now is test what we've done. So I'm gonna go ahead and put my HTML, and I'm gonna get my CSS, and now I'm gonna go to survey form and run test, and I got 15. Inside the form, I'm required to enter my name in a field with ID equal name. If I do not enter a name, I will see HTML. My second mistake is that oh, I totally forgot. Alright, it's just a simple mistake, is that right here inside my inputs right here, is that I have to put required. Over here, required, only in these three top inputs. What this does is that when I go here, if I leave something blank and I click submit, it'll ask me to fill it out. That's what I missed. So that's what required is there for. If you required sends out a message, an error message, a validation that asks you to fill this out if you leave it empty. So now if we go back and copy this, and run the test again. You have a 17 out of 17. Booyah. Alright folks, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed, hope you found this useful. So please leave a like, subscribe, leave any comments if anything is unclear, and peace.